You may recall that not long ago this Ed was described as a sexy beast and responded by saying he was a long, slow burn in the bedroom.
I did not say that for the avoidance of doubt.
Do you two get together and talk about sex symbol status quite often now, or how does it work?
No. But, you know, I think after that welcome on that bus, I think Ed Miliband, you know, they say
you're going to vote for him.
They say general elections change people's perceptions of politicians, and it's certainly changing people's perception of Ed.
Good. See you in a minute, indeed. You've basically got an awful lot in common, isn't that the truth?
Well, Nicola Sturgeon, I think, today has clearly been reading some of Ed Miliband's speeches, but the reality is that we are, one, absolutely aiming for a majority, and secondly, we will lay out a Queen's speech and a budget, and any MP in Parliament can choose to vote for it. But the SNP exists as a political party to break up the United Kingdom. That's what they are for, that's their raison d'etre. And the idea that we as a political party would be seeking to do a coalition or a deal with a party, a coalition or a deal where we're going to say, you know, on the budget or on spending or on defence, let's negotiate with a party which wants to break up the United Kingdom, as Ed Miliband said tonight, is just not going to happen. And the reason we're discussing this is because the David Cameron and the Conservatives have got nothing else to talk about in this election campaign other than this scare and this smear, because their own campaign's going so badly.
The reason we're talking about it is because every single poll and every single projection suggests that the most likely result by far at this stage is you, quite far short of a majority, but the only party seriously able to lead a government with the SNP and maybe the Lib Dems thrown in. And I think it's perfectly fair for people to engage in a discussion with that. And my point to you, my question actually was, you have got quite a lot in common, and you could perfectly easily work together, couldn't you?
Look, we will set out in a Queen's speech and a budget things like getting rid of the bedroom tax, a bank bonus tax for jobs for young people, the increase of the minimum wage, raising the bank levy for childcare. The SNP can decide.
Stuff they agree with.
They can decide whether to vote for it or not. But the issue is, and the scare from the Tories, is that there's going to be a coalition or a pact or a deal that we, Labour, will negotiate with a party which wants to break up the United Kingdom. I'm just saying to you, that's not going to happen.
Okay, I'll bring in
it's different, the SNP, compared to UKIP or the Tories or the Liberal Democrats, because the SNP exists to undermine the UK and to undermine Westminster.
I understand that, but there's another point here as well, you know. We've just had a referendum campaign, and a lot of people, a lot of unionist politicians said to people in Scotland, listen, stay with the union, we care about you, we'll listen to you, we'll take you seriously. They may be about to send a whole bunch of SNP MPs to Westminster. That's your answer. We can't really turn around and say to them, oh, well, we didn't actually mean it. You know, now you're sending us those MPs, we don't want to listen to them.
Of course not. Look, it's Scotland's political choice.
So wouldn't it be more honest to say we will talk to you, we will attempt to?
It's Scotland's political choice who they vote for. What we know is the more SNP MPs there are, the more likely we'll end up not with a Labour government but a Conservative government. And the only way for Scottish voters who don't want a Tory government to be sure they won't get it is not to vote SNP but to vote Labour. That is what they need to do. But we actually saw tonight the former Tory Scottish Secretary, Michael Forsyth, saying that the way in which the Tories in London have been talking up the SNP is putting party before country and undermining our United Kingdom. You've had George Osborne going around saying, aren't the SNP fabulous? They're doing so well. We all know what this is about. The SNP would rather have a Tory government. The Tories want the SNP to do well. They are in bed together, and we're the party who's saying we're going to have no truck with a party which wants to break up our United Kingdom, and we shouldn't do.
But it's much more of a problem.
I think, you know, some of the hard lines that they've introduced, like with Trident, for example, saying we will form a coalition with Labour if they agree to get rid of Trident. Now, personally, I would love to see this country give up on its commitment to Trident. I would love to see the Labour Party take that view, but it cannot be for that reason.
And Marcus, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I'm sorry to disappoint you. There is no way we're going to allow our national security and Trident to be caught up in some deal with a party which wants to break up the United Kingdom.
That's exactly what I'm saying, is the country would never forgive you.
No.
You'd have to, you
which is
should,
why
by
we
the way,
absolutely
give
won't
up on it, but for your own reasons.
Sorry,
I just want to bring in Louise here. Louise.
Is that the English will see this influence and get mightily fed up about it and actually just say, you know what, have your independence.
Well, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. Look, we've had this union for 300 years. There are far, far more English MPs than Scottish MPs or Welsh MPs. In a democracy, if the people of Scotland choose to elect people from the SNP, that's up to them. I hope they'll vote for Labour people instead, because I fear the SNP will let the Tories back in. But if they are in Westminster as legitimate MPs, they're there.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean we have to do deals with them or have
But you said you had another choice. You just said to Louise you had another choice. So what is the other choice?
Well, the issue was...
If you don't get a majority, what is your other choice other than the SNP?
Well, first of all, we want a majority.
No, I know what you want.
But secondly...
That's a completely different thing to what you may get.
But we do not need to and will not be reaching some kind of coalition agreement.
No, we know about the coalition.
Your colleague David Lammy has told my colleague Chris Shipp today that you may have to talk to the SNP.
Well,
that is surely the base reality of this that everyone in our audience knows.
I tell you, I think it will not happen, because I think in the end, the people of England and Wales seeing Labour negotiating with a party which wants to break up the United Kingdom and is asking for favours from us
but
for
a
that
legitimately
would not
voted,
be acceptable.
But two
I don't think
final
will
points
happen.
on this. A legitimately voted for party,
Sure.
which is not, as they keep saying, independence is not on the ballot paper for them this time. And secondly, isn't the basic truth that you have quite a lot of MPs on the left of your party who are actually not too worried about doing business with the SNP, partly because they think of it as having pushing for a more progressive alternative, which is what a lot of people are out there voting for.
As I said to you, we've got a manifesto and we will lay out a Queen's speech. As Ed Miliband said, Ed Miliband and I will write the budget, not the SNP. The SNP can decide, as all MPs can, if they want to not support a Labour budget or a Queen's speech in the House of Commons and instead would prefer a Conservative government. That is their choice. The issue is, are we going to be negotiating with them? David Cameron and John Major, the former Prime Minister, are going to be scaring people for the next 24 hours saying Labour is going to be negotiating with the SNP.
Okay.
These were the Tories who talked up the SNP last week. They're doing it for their own political advantage because they know they are not strong enough to win on their own.
Have you been sending out mixed messages, do you think, in recent times?
I think that, that slogans aren't enough. And the reality is I think Labour spent some of the last 20 years just taking it for granted. We were, of course, the party of working people. I mean, we're Labour, and we weren't doing enough to actually show we were and have the policies to match. And in the end, people are going to vote in this election, not on the basis of slogans, but who's got the policies. So if you take last week, we were saying we're going to abolish the non-domicile tax status, which means a small number of people can get away with paying tax because they are very rich and were born abroad. And the Conservatives were saying they were going to keep that. I think that that made the Tories look pretty out of touch.
But on another policy,
I think that showed that we were in line with working people.
But on another policy, for example, do you regret that the coalition managed to make raising the personal allowance their kind of issue on the grounds that that surely should be your territory, you know, reducing tax for the very lowest paid?
But they increased the personal allowance and they called that a tax cut, and they raised VAT to 20%. And what the Institute for Fiscal Studies shows is the combination of the VAT rise, the personal allowance and cuts to tax credits means that the average working person is £1,100 worse off. And the fact was, Nick Clegg voted for the VAT rise. So if they just raised the personal
allowance, would you say unequivocally that that's a good thing and you wished you'd done it?
We've said when we come into government, if we win the election, that we're going to reintroduce the 10p starting rate of income tax. I think getting rid of that was a big mistake for Labour in the last Parliament, and we think the 10p rate is actually a better next step than the personal allowance because it gets the marginal tax rate down as well. But I've not opposed the personal allowance rises. That's fine. It's taking people out of tax. The problem is it's paid for by the rise in VAT and cuts to tax credits, which have hit most people really hard.
OK, Louise, back to the start. Is Labour convincingly the party of working people, do you think, still?
I think the problem is the most successful politician your party's ever had is Tony Blair. And to be fair, I heard him speak about a year ago, and he was, I would suggest, righter than David Cameron. And so I think you have this history that your most successful leader was really not old Labour. He was definitely New Labour, and he was really quite right-wing. You know, embraced, non-doms financing the party.
He introduced the minimum wage. and invested in the National Health Service. He did some really important things. The thing is, in the end, look, there's some people who will call themselves working class, and there's some people who call themselves middle class, but actually, very many people in work, middle or working class, have found the last few years really hard because the bills have gone up and the wages haven't. And we stand up for people who are working hard and playing by the rules and want to have a better life. And I think that's true whether they're
bring
working
Louise
class or
in to
middle
finish her
class.
point. Yeah.
Oh,
On your phone,
yeah.
you can hand them around.
We will later. Ed, have you been around for scrambled eggs at the other Eds?
Oh, can I just say that he made the scrambled egg properly in a frying pan.
I think
Did it properly.
I was witness to it all.
I
even ate it. Have you eaten scrambled eggs? You haven't been to the pub with him. Have you?
I
been
have
round
been
for
round. I have been round.
for scrambled eggs?
But I think
Has Ed ever cooked for you?
I'm going to take a very clear rule, which is what happens in the kitchen should stay in the kitchen. I think I'm going to.
We're back to sexy beasts again at the top. No, we're not.
What happens in the
That's
but Jane,
Jane novels. You
the
mean?
reason why those photos, those pictures are there is because Tom likes going into politicians' kitchens. If we said, come
It's not all my fault.
if it's,
You can't say no.
if it was come to our advice surgery or I'll meet you in the shed or let's go to Tesco's, you wouldn't be as interested. You want
the
to
shed
get
would be
behind
interesting.
and get in the kitchen and see the real person. Isn't that true?
Well, I've never been invited to your kitchen. I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
We don't trust any of these things anymore.
No.
How many ducks? How many ducks? Isn't there a truth
Have you got ducks in your book?
Of course.
God,
But listen, what
I know
happens
this is
in
a
the
late night
bathroom-
show, but
what
this
happens
is
in the
getting kind of
bathroom
weird.
stays in the
Okay,
bathroom.
Let's
let's.
have an actual duck house.
There is a truth, though. Not one of those. Isn't there a truth that if we're making decisions about people's lives, people want to know that politicians understand the lives of the people we're making decisions about, and therefore there is a public interest in knowing that
But we
politicians
kind
are
of know
real
that.
people?
We know you have a kitchen. So then when we see a sanitised version of a kitchen, so for example, Ed's 2 kitchens, I don't care whether Ed's got a big kitchen or bigger kitchen than me or whatever, but what I do care about is that there's a manipulation by somebody, some spin doctor who goes, oh, look, we'll do it in the 2nd kitchen, not thinking that we're going to know. Stage managed.
You do spend a lot of time in your kitchen, though, don't you? You are the cook.
Sure, yeah.
And you love cooking.
I
So
love to
we
cook.
could film you in your kitchen.
Well,
that would be an authentic thing to do
As it
on
happens,
a Friday night.
As it happens, there's never been any
This
filming
Friday night,
in our
for
kitchen.
example.
But I do cook and I love to cook
Okay.
and it's very, very relaxing. But we also actually knock on doors and talk to people and want to know what they
Okay.
care about.
Which
And actually-
kitchens you cook in? Your big kitchen or your little kitchen?
They've only got one. Marcus, we need your headline. Let's have a look at the headlines of you. What
the
headline
leaders-
would you like to see?
The leaders have been travelling all around the country, meeting voters, and so I said, it's leaders meet their biggest fan.
There we go. Just to be clear, that's David Cameron waving at himself. A very nice image. I'm sure accidentally caught.
And the hen party down the bottom.
Yes, were you a little bit surprised to see the reaction of the hen party, or
Not
is it a
as-
standard out and about?
Not as surprised as Ed Miliband was my was my sense.
It hasn't done him any harm, though. One feels,
I think, look, it's always nice to be mobbed by a hen party.
Does it happen to you?
Oh, most weeks.
Right, that is all we've got time for tonight.